Welcome. You're listening to the Earth Conversations podcast, where we explore how to open up to the greater conversation with Earth herself and with our fellow co-inhabitants such as trees, animals, and plants through interspecies communication. In this time of environmental destruction, it truly is urgent that we begin exploring what Earth and her other than human communities are telling us. If you like to explore more in-depth material on this subject, please also visit our blog at earthconversations.org, where you can sign up to be notified through email about new podcast conversations, blog posts, events, and much more. We're excited and happy to have you join us for this podcast as we now go lie our heart at the ground and listen.
Hi, I'm MiMer, Joe, and I'm your host from this very first Earth Conversation podcast. And today I'm here with my very first guest, Katarina Felicia Lundgren. Katarina's passions are understanding and working with equines and humans in therapy so it can benefit both clients and horses. She's involved in research and educational projects to spread knowledge, awareness of ethics, welfare, and best practices when we work with equines in therapy. The research she's involved in focuses on equine to equine and equine-human interaction. She's currently writing her master thesis on equine-human interaction in Equine Assisted Psychotherapy. She is an equine professional who works in teams and offers experiential learning and therapy with horses. She travels the world to educate about the teamwork, the equine's role and welfare needs, and the equine's professional's need of knowledge, awareness, and responsibility in the equine-assisted activities and therapies. She's also a co-founder and chair of the board in MiMer, a small independent education, research, and treatment center. MiMer is a co-organizer of the Minds and Motions, A Horse is a Horse of Course, international symposiums on equine welfare and wellness, and the publisher of the following compendiums with the same name. A very warm welcome to you, Katarina, and thank you for participating in this very first Earth Conversations podcast.
Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, you're welcome. I've been following your work for a while, and I find it really, really interesting. Maybe you could tell me in your own words what it is that you do in your work.
Oh, yeah. I am an equine-human interaction nerd, and with a focus on what happens between equine and clients and in equine assisted psychotherapy. That's mostly it. And I do offer trainings in how to do this work, and we are developing different levels. So this is my focus for the moment. And I also do some research in the area, both in equine-equine interaction and equine-human interaction, and then with the focus on therapy.
Okay, thank you.
Kind of. Yeah.
It's a very vast repertoire, but it's a very important repertoire. And I've been following your work for a while. And you're doing a master's degree on, a PhD in cognitivity in horses. Is that correct? No.
No, I'm currently writing my master thesis on. I'm trying to apply the theory of intersubjectivity on what goes on between equines and humans in psychotherapy. I do have plans for a PhD, and I have submitted a grant proposal to find money to do it, but I'm still not finished with my master's.
Okay, good. Thank you. I've been visiting your farm, which is it's a really wonderful place and a really beautiful piece of land in the southern part of Sweden. And when I was there, I noticed that there was quite a belonging between at least the horses and the land, and also between you and the land there. So I'd like to start out by asking you, how do you hear the earth or the land speak or call to you where you live?
I don't know. I love this piece of land that I am currently living and working on, or not just this piece of land, but because it's surrounded by really beautiful nature reserves that I spend a lot of time in. How I feel called, I love being there. It's kind of being part of an ecosystem together with the horses. When I feel part of the horse herd, and they live out there, so I become part of their environment. And actually, I think if I could, I would probably move out there. Yeah.
What does the conversation feels like in your being or in your body? Is there any different emotions or sensations, or when do you feel most in communion with the land?
I spend a lot of time taking photos out there. So I lay on the ground, and I often go barefoot. So I don't know. I get another perspective when I'm on the ground, laying on the ground, and I see the horses from other angles, and I see the sky, and I see, yeah, it's another perspective. And the horses are used to it now, so they don't react anymore. Though people react to me laying around on the ground, but it's a feeling of being connected. And I don't have many relatives. I don't have a large family, and the family I have, I'm not really connected to. So the land has become my family, kind of, or my relatives. And I can feel when I'm out in the woods or in the meadows that they're ancestors, kind of. So they embrace me, and they support me, and they walk by my side in my journey here on Earth. Yeah, kind of like they're a family.
A larger family.
Yeah. Yes, and then it doesn't. I don't know. Like you're not inventing anything new. You have always standed on the shoulder of those who came before you, and all that you carry, you can turn around and look at all the people behind you. So though I don't have that family, I can still feel that connection to the land or the ground or the earth.
I can certainly recognize what you're saying, because I have that ancestry feel with the land as well. And sometimes I have this, I remember one instance in a forest with very ancient trees, where I felt that the trees were my true ancestors. So I think that being a part of the whole and a part of the land is very much a family situation.
Yeah, we are complex systems, but as humans, but we are also part of this bigger complex system, and everything is alive, and we are just a tiny part of it.
How did you first become aware of being a part of this complex system? What at least consciously?
I've always been drawn to nature, and I don't know, all parts of nature. I love the sea, and I love the woods, and I love the meadows, and I love everything about it. And I always walk around with stones in my pockets and stuff, picking up feathers and minding all the small animals I see, and being really fascinated with little bugs and all this. But I think it started maybe around when you were here, or a little bit before that, for real, when I actually felt this real strong connection. And I started, I dropped my shoes and went barefoot more and more. Yeah, maybe.
Do you think that all humans have access to this conversation just in their own way, or this being a part of this greater, grander family?
Yeah, I do. I think it's about how this feeling of groundedness, like if you feel grounded inside, it becomes an interplay between your inside and the outside. Or for me, it's like that at least. So the earth and the connection to earth makes me feel grounded to myself. And that, I think, is something everybody can practice and embrace if they want to. And I think people who live in the city might need more help with it. Because when you feel that and that you're belonging to the earth, you care more about it. And if you live really disconnected from it, you don't take care of it. It's not your responsibility. So I think it's important.
Yeah, I think caring is a very big key in getting into that relationship again and wanting to be with the natural world, and thereby also wanting to protect them more, or at least work against the current degradation that is happening, restoring instead, if we start caring.
Yeah, and I think if you feel disconnected from yourself, you can't feel connected to the earth either. So it's a kind of a symbiosis and coming and going. Like you need to be in nature, and then you feel more connected to yourself. And you feel more connected to yourself, you feel more connected to nature. So it's this both ways communication.
Do you feel that there's a caring for you as an individual from nature? Because I find that, especially where I live now, there's a real caring from the land that surprised me to begin with, that the land loved me, because I normally haven't thought about it or felt in that way before, but there's such a love from the land. And through that love that I feel, or that caring from the land that I felt being here, feel being here, I've come to care more for myself. So do you think it's a two-way street in that way as well? Or?
I think so. I think when you start to understand the concept of self-care and be open to it, because not everyone is. Many people just run around and being really stressed all the time, and they don't really think about what they need. But we all need support, and social support, and emotional support, and sometimes we can't get it from humans or even from non-human animals, and then we can have it from the earth. And I don't feel it's particularly connected to this place. I can feel it kind of any place I lay on the ground. I can feel like the earth is hugging me. It's like I feel embraced. I feel that I belong. I feel connected, and then I feel connected to myself and to other people as well, because that's what happens when you feel connected. Then it carries over to all living beings around you. Well, that's my experience.
You work in psychotherapy with horses, and also, of course, surrounded in this beautiful nature where you live. Do you find that there's such a difference from so many traumatized people have difficult connecting with other human beings, but more easily connects with animals and the natural world? Do you find that plays a big role, or not so much?
Yeah, and if I just stick to talking about myself, I also have trauma in my background, and for me it has helped tremendously, like feeling connected to the earth and to animals and to everything around me that is not humans. And there is a bridge over from this to humans. So I think you can practice relationship with and social understanding and dynamics and emotional regulation and grounding and everything by being outside a lot. And you can add this with moving around and all this also, because your body becomes part of this experience, and the connection between the motion and the emotion becomes clearer, I think.
How do your body become part of the experience for you? How do you feel that?
Because I feel more grounded. By being more grounded, there is room for me to be more aware, more self-aware. If I am only in my head and in my mind and only thinking and being intellectual and not recognizing my own body or my feelings in my body, I feel disconnected to everything. So it again carries over. The disconnect as the feeling of connection is. If I feel connected to the earth or to an animal, I learn how that feels, and I can use it in other social interactions.
Do you have an affinity with one species more than with others? I mean, I know now you work a lot with horses, but you also have sheep and you have a dog and there's trees around. And
I do feel a close relationship with horses, and I don't really know why. They have followed me since I was a little kid, and I didn't have access to horses as a kid, but I read these stories about horses, and I longed for horses, and I thought about horses and all this. And I also have had quite a big fear for horses. They seemed so powerful and strong and scary in some way. So my journey into working with horses has not been the traditional one. And I had to figure out a lot of stuff about myself and how this relationship between horses and me could look like. So it was a lot of trial and error, and but the more I am with them, the more fascinated I become. So I'm super nerdy by now. And now I really enjoy meeting whatever horses. And the fascinating thing is that the fear I thought I was the only one who was carrying, I now see that many people have, but they don't mention it, because if you are a horse person, you're not supposed to be afraid of horses. So it's kind of interesting phase to be in. Like, I've been so preoccupied with myself, so I've not recognized that this is actually some kind of human trait or something. There are, of course, people who have grown up with horses, like Mongolian herds people that I met in Mongolia. They don't fear horses because horses are so... They've always lived with them. But we in the West, we don't live with our horses like we live with dogs, for example, or cats. So they are not that known to us, and we don't really know them the same way. Now I spend so much time with horses, so I actually feel very at home. And I usually say that I feel the most safe when I am in the middle of a horse herd. I feel really protected.
Do you think that the horses as a collective species have a particular mode of preferred or a way to communicate with humans, or an inclined way to communicate with humans through something that belongs to them as an individual species? What I'm getting at is, do you think cows communicate in one way and horses in another, and a bee in another, as a collective species, not as an individual with humans?
I never thought about that, but spontaneously, no. I think it's about listening and giving space, room for a conversation. And yeah, of course they have different behaviors because they are different species. A horse doesn't do bee dance, and so yeah, there are traits in the communication that are different because they have different bodies and different senses and all this. Then impact their behaviors. But if you just keep the pure communication part, I don't think it's different.
Do you think that a horse will adapt its communication to how it communicates with a human being or how it communicates with a bird in the field?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
But because they know that we are humans, and they know that the bird is a bird, and they know about birds and they know about humans. So yeah, I think we also communicate differently with dogs versus cats or horses or humans. Partly, some stuff is the same, but also different.
We know as a human species that we have our at least 5 senses that we normally pick up communication signals through. Our eyes, our ears, a sense of smell and sense of touch and so on. And there might actually be other senses that we're communicating through as well. But we also know that animals and plants communicate through different senses and sees the world differently. In your work, how has that shown up with horses in the horse-human interaction?
They have their vision is very different from ours, for example. So the process visual input differently than we do. We know that our brain is mapped to our senses. So the part that takes care of talking, for example, is very big in humans. And since, I think it affects the whole, how the senses functions is going to tell how these individuals see the world, but also how he processes perceptions. And thereby how he behaves in the world. So that's also a two-way communication. The horses they communicate with, we do that too, but we don't really pay attention to it. We communicate with body posture, we communicate with rhythm, and a lot of stuff we don't usually talk about. And we have kind of the proprioception and the nociception, how you receive pain and how you know where your body is in space, and all this also different. Some is same and some is different between humans and equines, and it will color how we see the world. Not sure I answer your question.
It's fine. Do you think there's a commonly collective field that we can all tune into and understand each other from there? Some people would call it the field of morphic resonance, or Rupert Sheldrake, who's a biologist at Cambridge, would call it morphic resonance.
I know. I think we are so far away from knowing that. When I look at research in equines, there is a lot of things we don't know about equines. We know about the bigger behaviors and often about the agonistic or aggressive behaviors. We know very little about how they create friendships between each other, for example, and the smaller, more subtle behaviors that we don't really pick up on. And there's a huge amount of information that we miss about equines and other species as well. So if we share a collective way of communication, Maybe. I don't know.
But this is why I find your work so interesting, is that human society as it is now generally has a way of ruling out anything we can't see and measure in our own terms. We largely base intelligence on what we can see and measure through the technological advances that we've made. And we also seem to have this inclination to try and make other species communicate through those means that we use, instead of standing back and adapting to their way of communication, or at least observing their way of communication, maybe through a different lens than what our textbooks are telling us. What is your what do you think we miss by trying to fit like horses or any other animal species into our way of measurement?
Oh, we miss a lot. We miss a perspective, and that's actually a huge thing to miss out on. I'm the kind of person I find it interesting to have a lot of different theories and a lot of questions about stuff, but I don't necessarily need the answer. So I don't know if there is a collective way of communicating, and it's not important for me to know either. I explore stuff, I try things out, and then I see where I end up, and then I have new questions, and it's just interesting to explore. But to say yes there is or no there isn't, it's not important to me.
What does it take to see through a different lens than the one we generally have been taught?
We need to be better to listen and observe. And we need to be aware of our very human lenses. Like, we are humans, we can't see stuff from any other perspective than a human, but we can be aware of that we are doing that. And then we have to add our cultural lenses, our own personal lenses, the background, everything. Since I have a trauma background, I need to be aware that I might have trauma lenses on when I look at other beings. Maybe I'm good at picking up signs of trauma. Maybe I also see it where there isn't any trauma. I need to be constantly aware of, what am I seeing here? Does this come from me, or does it come from the one I'm actually observing or listening to? And that discernment I find very, very, very important. It's so easy to project your own ideas onto someone else. And I see that a lot in the equine world, where people start to be spokesperson for equines. They say they voice them, and they have this idea of why they are on Earth and what they are telling us and everything. And for me, that's just interpretations, because we can't really know. So let's just be open and listen instead of talking so much about what they're doing or saying or meaning, communicating. I find that the most interesting part.
Do you think there's a difference of this transference or projecting, or whatever you would call it? I'm not sure of the correct psychotherapy term. You might correct me there, and please do. And
I'm not a therapist, so but
no,
yeah.
But you've studied more than I've done in this sense.
I've heard about therapy.
Yeah. Me too. I come from a trauma background as well, so I completely resonate with what you're saying, and I have to really watch out for my trauma lenses as well. And I did that in the beginning with horses. Actually, this is a little bit of an interesting story, because I used to ride classic dressage when I was young, and I was fairly good at it. And horses was a lot of my life. And then I was away from horses for a huge period of time. And I came back into the horse world. And just before I've been trying to come back into the horse world. And just before I actually did, I realized my traumatic background. I started remembering my traumatic background. And then I started finding research work that was done on horses and their traumatization and all of these things. And I projected it onto the whole of the established equine world in the beginning, whereas I just recently, I've been pulling back, like in steps from that, and through my own process, of course, my filters become more apparent. My own trauma perspectives become more apparent through the inner work that I've done. And the psychotherapy work that I've done. But recently, because I acquired my first so-called pets or companion animals, it's my actual first experience with having to fit other beings into my box, because I can't make them wild or set them free again. And I suddenly realized, actually, through a book I read, and I forgot that. I'll post that after the podcast. I'll post that in the comment sections, because I forgot the name of the book, and I even forgot the author's name right now. But he's been working with communication in animals, and he was writing a lot about how certain horses actually how they really like to be carrier horses. So I had to kind of rethink my whole position on how domestication in horses through different species had certain inclinations to certain kinds of works. And I remembered, because my friend has horses here in Denmark, and one of her horses is a northern Swedish forest horse. I'm not sure that's the correct name of the species in English, but these are huge horses that have been developed or domesticated, bred to do forest work, to carry logs or drag logs out of the forest. And she's using this horse to a certain form of dressage. She doesn't call it dressage, it's another measure of it. And what I felt through this horse, and what she's seen as well, is that when he's in the forest, and I mean, I'm sure this horse would love to drag logs and, go through the forest. Every time he puts down his foot in the forest and he's there, his whole being is buzzing with life, and he's happy and he's adventurous, and, he's just so at home in that element. And I think he would love to actually use his body in a more physical way of, pushing and drawing and being more robust. And when he's on the small court and trying to do dressage, he's not at home in his body at all, because actually that wasn't, what he was bred for, made for. So how do you feel domestication has, what is the role of domestication in our interaction with horses, and how we live with them now? And is that I hate to use this correct way we live with them, but maybe not correct way, but do you think they like where they are now? And I know this is a generalization, and there's always an individual voice in each horse, but domestication plays a role in our society as it is today, and I like to explore this a little bit.
So we have certainly changed the evolution of the horse by domesticating them. And we have made a lot of choices for them. And we are even more intensely now breeding on stuff that we find interesting or beautiful, or we strengthen different things in different horses and horse breeds. If we, for example, with a racing horse, we breed for speed, and in dressage horses, we breed for movement and for fear, because we want this explosiveness in them. And in the draft horses, we breed for strength and stamina and muscle building. I don't know. What we do not breed for is companionship. Because in dogs, for example, we have bred on the puppy gene. Like we keep actually dogs small their whole life. And we haven't done that with horses. So we breed for a lot of different things, but we mostly keep them for some kind of emotional support. Or we want them to be cuddly and friendly and like us and all this. It's hard. I think it's hard to be a horse in the human society because we want them to be so much. And our breeding criteria is really strange sometimes. Sometimes we're really focused on just how they look or the size of them, or if they are spotty or have, I don't know, a lot of different things. So, we do interfere a lot in the equine evolution, but Sorry.
What was your experience in Mongolia? Because there you said they lived as a part of the family. The horse was more a part of the family, and they lived with their horses in a more close
the humans
proximity.
The horses live very nearby. They don't have fences, so they live. The people that are horse nomads, they live in the yurts, and the horses are around them a lot, and they have like often 100, 200, 300 horses, and they milk them over the summer. And they have their life, like the schedule of their days are just about taking care of the horses in the summertime. And they grow up like this, so there are horses around, and that's often that they are given a little foal when they are really small, and then they grow up with this horse. So they spend a huge amount of time together with horses. And I asked Mongolian herders, how do you learn about horses and horse behavior? And they kind of laughed and said, spend time with them. And we don't. In our society, we have a horse, and we might have them in a livery yard, and we'd go there maybe 3 times a week, 4 times, and then we rush in and we groom them, and then we ride them or lunch them, and then we put them back in the stable, and then off we go again. We meet them in so strange situations, and not many people that I know, more now, but don't go out and just hang with them without an agenda or idea why they have them or what they are good for, or they need to be ridden or trained or something to feel function in most people's view of horses. And then you see a lot of stuff that is about you and not about them. Your own goals, your own need for exercise, your own...
I think we lost the connection. I'm just going to see if we can get Katarina back. Sorry, I think I lost you there for a second, Katarina.
It was my phone who called, so I just declined it. Yeah.
And so we use them for sports or recreation, she said, so we don't spend time with them. Yeah.
No, we don't see them as they are. We see what we need. I think we need.
And how did you find, because I'm interested in hearing more about how the herd of horses stays close to the Mongolian family when there's no fences or anything. How do you think that interaction of that family bond or that closeness of bond, they feed them, I suppose, but there must be something else holding. They don't feed the horses.
No, they don't feed the horses. Horses have home ranges, so they don't defend the territory, but they have home ranges. So they are in a certain area, and the herders, they move only from summer pasture to winter pasture, and it's often the same each year. So the horses knows this. So they have this move twice a year. But for the rest of the time, they live where they are, and they don't need fences because horses don't really leave their home range. They can wander off and meet other horses and start new families, but they are like 100, 200, 300 horses already. They don't need that. There is this story about that people don't really sell horses in Mongolia, because if you sell it, it will just go home again.
Mm.
So most people just breed their own horses in Mongolia. So I think it's more a factor that the human families stay in the home range of the horses than the other way around.
I've heard an old story from Mongolia that once a Mongolian herder was asked how he broke in the horse, how he trained the horse, how they got to ride them. And the tale from the Mongolian herder was that he didn't understand the question at first. And then he told them that when you live with a horse and you just are with it or be with it, then suddenly one day it will let you ride you. It will just say, okay, and then you will begin riding. Do you think that's a tale, or do you have a different experience?
I think partly it's like that because they don't really break them, and they're not really tame. They have this big herd of horses, and they have a couple of them that they ride like more, but they just go out and pick one, and they are half tame. Then I don't really want to romanticize it either, because some of their horsemanship skills, or what we call it, their equipment, and I wouldn't say that is appropriate always, or you cannot say that's good equine welfare. And there are ignorant at some points. But the way they live with horses, and they pick up little nuances in horses, and the most of the questions I asked them, everything was so natural for them. Of course horses have a wide range of emotions, for example. Of course they feel pain. Of course they learn by watching each other. And when I ask people here about that, that's not really what people answer. It's like, yeah, they might feel pain, but not really the same way we do. Or of course they have emotions, but probably not as we do, and all this. And no, it's not really sure. They learn from each other. And it's like, okay, it's a big difference how they view the horses. They view the horses as very, very capable beings. They can take care of themselves. They even protect humans from wolves and stuff. And they find their own food. They don't feed them. They find their own food, even in the wintertime.
So there's an empowerment of the horses in that they make their own decisions all the way through, even the decision to stay. It's an individual species along the same line as the human species, just a different physical and perspective makeup, so to speak.
It's a more co-living than one species is more important and more dependent on the other, because it's co-independence, co-living, sharing space, and if I give this to you, you give this to me.
I think there's a very great distinction that these horses makes most of their own decisions, even when to stay or when to go or when to feed and when not to feed. I mean, they're not time to our clock. This is something that I've noticed very much in our society. Even vets, veterinarians, or animal trainers, we're taught how horses or any animal has to feed the same time every day, the same things. All of these things, and we've taken so many choices away from the horses, and we've put them into a clockwork where they can't be more hungry. Yes, they might get more feed in winter because there's less grass and stuff like that when it comes to horses. But if you take other domesticated animals, we feed them the same amount, at the same time every day, and we think it's what they want because we've been taught that's how it is. And my experience now is that sometimes they're more hungry, and sometimes they're less hungry, and sometimes they want their food earlier, and sometimes they seem to want their food later. And so in keeping the westernized domestication process is keeping them away from making their own choices. Do you think we can move back into a place in the Western culture where we can give them more of their choices back?
Yes. I think it's very, very important that we do, because that's part of what I call positive equine welfare. That problem solving, possibility to explore, make your own decisions, be an agent in your own life. That is what welfare is about. It's not about feeding them or having a nice stable or this that they think it is about. That is a basic, of course, need to make sure that your horse has proper feed and proper water and all this. But what life quality is about, it's not about that. That's the basic fundamental needs. But life quality is about being your own being able to decide stuff for yourself, choose, learn, have challenges, grow, all this. And that we don't really provide our horses with. And when we do, we have these ideas about enrichment, when we put like plastic balls in the stable or something. But enrichment for me is providing the horse with trees in the paddock and streams and different kind of dirt, earth, and letting them solve their own problems by scratching their butt to a tree or something. But we want to solve the problems by putting fly masks and feed them and take care of them as they were porcelain horses. And they are not. And I think that's bad welfare. I was thinking about something else you said, but I don't remember what it was for the moment. Also this misunderstanding about what you talked about routines, feeding in a certain time frame and all this. We think routine and consistency is very good for horses. What we forget is that it's not the routine that is the consistency, it's you. If you continually are the safe person for the horse, that is the continuity, the need. Not that they are fed at 3 o'clock every day. That's the same for humans. Human can eat whenever and whatever, but as a kid, for example, if you have access to a real safe person, that is what counts. Not when you are fed. And we kind of mix that up when we look at our pets, our companion animals.
I think we mix that up when we look at ourselves as well, because we put ourselves on the clock. The way we work, the way society work, you have to be hungry around 12 or 1 o'clock because that's lunch hour.
Stop listening to yourself.
Exactly. So we stop listening to our body and our body's needs. So coming back into that might be correlated to being able to listen or perceive or observe what is needed for the horses. Or any other animals.
Give them more choices. Yeah, give them more choices. Like, okay, there is food, eat when you want. But we have such a strong need to feed animals because that's how we as humans bond. So we want to offer food because it makes us feel good. So that's a human thing that we put on them with the feeding.
Do you find any difference in these traits between, let's say, horses and sheep? You have a few sheep on your farm, or even your dogs or other animals. I'm just thinking of a black lab, because that really, a black lab seems to really love its treats. But that might be something we put on them as well through our perception of a individual species.
Dogs bond with food, and cats. but not horses, because they don't share food and bond over that, but like we do. If you think about humans, we invite people for dinner, we have business lunches. There's always food involved. And for horses, they share space, but they don't share food. So, but dogs do share food to bond. So that's just a species-specific difference that we need to know about. I forgot your question.
No, that was just a trail of what you were saying. But when we do give more choice back to horses of making their own choices, do you find that individuals in a herd, that somebody might have a more need for adventure, or somebody has a better developed sense of keeping friendships in the herds, like not having too many fights or whatever? Do you think horses have different characterization traits like human being has? Some people are good at playing volleyball, and some people are good at solving puzzles, so how do you see that showing up in the horse once they get their choices back?
They have very much different personalities, very much so, like we have, and every other animal as well. Some are bold, some are more shy, some are more adventurous, some are more playful, some are more, a lot of different things. And partly I think it's genetic, and partly it's where they grow up, in which group, what parent they had, what happened to them. That's a lot of different input to tell why they become personality they become. And they can also change, like they grow. If with proper challenges and possibility to grow, they can also change. I think humans in general think that many traits in horses are kind of innate, that they're born with them. Like all horses are born fearful, for example. And I don't think that. I think that's learned. Most of that behavior is learned. They are fast learners, and they are very good at remembering. So, yeah, there is this discussion of what is nature and what is nurture in all of us. But I do think we very much overestimate the part of the nature in other beings than humans. And there are definitely very different personalities. And they also have this bond that is different between them. Like one horse likes this horse better, and they pair up for life and becomes really good friends. And then they have a problem with another horse. That's like we humans, like it's chemical, and it's also in different phases in life and stuff. So, sorry.
No, it's fine.
Go on.
Can you imagine a society where fences and cages are not a part of domestication, and how would that look? I mean, if...
As it is now, no. Because, and I don't, we live in the world we do. There are roads, there are very dangerous environments for horses out there. I think we can adapt better so they can have more quality of life and don't have to live in such small pastures that many horses do live in. I think we can start to understand better what keeping them caged and locked up and in small spaces, what's doing to them. But I think that's a long perspective to change and let everyone out. And even if we did, we are so overpopulated on this earth. We need to find ways to cohabitat and coexist and co-live. And there will probably be need of fences and roads and all this. I have a hard time to see how we can step back into some romantic nature picture of everybody living out in nature together. The technique is here to stay, and all what that means for us, I think.
But do you think we can move towards, or how do you think we can move towards a society that is more equal to animals and humans, where the equality gets less of a gap?
I think partly by learning more about other species. I have this thing that I always tell people, like, okay, humans and horses, for example, if we look at these two species, we are mammals. We have a lot in common. Our central nervous system works the same way, and we have the same basic emotions and all this. But then we're different species, species-specific traits that makes us need different things. Horses need to eat other things than we do because we have different digestive systems, for example. And then we go down to the individual differences. Each horse is an individual and therefore have individual needs. So whatever solutions we come up with needs to tailor to all these different levels of differences and similarities. And now I forgot the new question again.
It was how we could move closer into a society that equals out that gap between cohabitation of other species and human species.
Yeah, that's by learning about these differences and similarities, and then stay aware of what is mine in this. So, how do I need horses? Why do I have horses? What part do they play in my life? Is this beneficial for horses? How can we find ways that are good for the horses and good for me, and take into account all these differences and similarities that I mentioned? So, yes, we need to learn more about horses, but also about ourselves, because we constantly come up against ourselves. And so some kind of development of awareness. What role do I play as a human being and as an individual and as a mammal and all this in all of this? Right.
Do you think that by empowering our domesticated animals more, giving them more choices, giving them more self-governing, more self-empowerment, do you think we can empower ourselves through that process?
Yes, I think.
How
because
so?
that's a need in all of us to become more empowered. We want that. We strive for growth. I think every being is a learning being, a learning individual. Wherever we started from, we want to grow and develop. I think we have this inbuilt in ourselves. And therefore, by helping another being to get empowered, you empower yourself in the same way as a parallel process. That's why I think also equine assisted psychotherapy and learning works so beautifully when there is space for both the client and the horse to grow in that setting. Then it becomes some mutual beneficial environment. So one is not growing on the other's behalf. Like, yeah, it's good that humans feel better when they are around horses, but if the horses only tolerate it or even is negatively impacted by it, that's not equal. That's not balance. So our way of looking at animals, like we use them for things, like for comfort or because we are interested in them or for riding or all these different animals. Also in therapies, we use them as therapy animals. That's not okay. We can't use living beings for anything. But we can invite them so we both can grow. That will empower both of us.
That's, I think that's actually exactly what made me fall in love with your place and your way of doing things when I was there. I think it's 4 or 5 years now ago. But that is that it was very clear from the very beginning, these horses, I can tell the listeners that these horses actually have enough space to get lost if they don't want to be a part of whatever is going on. So they can move more freely than most horses, at least in this part of the world. There might be greater lands in the United States and so on, but they have a lot of space over there and different areas of space so they can move freely. But what I really fell in love with was this notion that you're in the horse's home now. So even though this is a therapy session or a demonstration, then this is the horse's home. Please respect their wishes and respect their space. And we don't pressure the horse to do anything. So if you want to do anything, or you step back, can you? Because I think that made all of the difference for me when I was at your space, because I felt more relaxed and more welcomed by that, actually, even, And also you had this story of how you went from riding school, you had a riding school where you taught children how to ride. And once you let your horses free and not force them to be a part of that riding school, some horses would still interact with you, but other horses would take up to 2 years before they started coming back to any interaction with you, and you let them be free in that. So can you tell me more about that process of moving actually from that power over to empowerment of the horse?
Yeah.
In your case, the horse.
My riding school was never about riding. It was called the Little Horse School because we wanted to emphasize from the beginning that this is not about riding. This is about getting to know the horse and the horse's need. And that included all this need. What does it need to eat, and how can we provide it with good emotional environment, for example. So I don't think they ever I don't feel they left me at any point, or that they came back to me. But when I bought them, and I bought like 20 horses, for example, in different sizes, to be part of this Little Horse School, and they went through this wakening up when they came here. Like, I bought them as these docile, calm, learning masters for different levels of riders and how to be with horses. And they went through this when they figured out that they could say no to things, they said no to everything. No, we don't want to do this. No. And then they went into but maybe. And they started to say yes to things. And then we went further and explored, okay, we have given them the choice to say yes or no, and even maybe. And then how can we wait for them to take initiative and ask us questions? Like, if we are serious by saying, I want to ask you or invite you to do something, I need to respect the answer. So if you say no, and so, okay, that's fine. That's totally fine. But then maybe you say, but I would like to do that thing, like maybe like we did yesterday or something. And then I have okay, I need to let you choose maybe instead. Totally forget what I have planned to do that day. So that process I followed in all my horses, how they learned how this is a world of choice, not pressure and not praise either. I don't train horses. I try to build relationships. Then I don't say I'm very good at it, but it's an exploration journey. I explore who he is or she is, the horse, and they can explore who I am. And then we find some common ground on what we want to do together. And then we'll see where we end up. And that would be different with different individuals. So but what happened was that after a couple of years with the riding school, and we did equally much, we did a lot of stuff. riding in the woods, walking with horses in hand in the woods, making behavioral studies with the kids out in the pastures and all this. But the horses at some point, I felt they asked me like, okay, there is a lot of sitting on us, and we're kind of like your people that you bring here, but can we do more other things? And then I had to ask my customers, like, I want to do more of this totally other thing that is not including riding or driving or any traditional equestrian sports or horsemanship. And there were a couple of customers who stayed with me, but most of them said, no, this is such an important part for us that we are then going to another riding school. And at the same time, I found this equine assisted therapy and learning that I could work with. And it fitted me better where I were with my horses at that time. So it took a year to transit, and I then closed my riding school.
What do you think our language around domestication plays in having a more free relationship? Because, as you said, we call it a riding school. We call it riding boots, riding pants, riding,
Yes.
Everything is riding, and it actually has nothing to do with the horse. So moving away from this power over to empowerment, how imperative do you think it is changing our language around it?
It's very important, and language can be very confusing. And there is no clarity, because I was thinking about that the other day. Like, many people express that they want to empower people, but they actually try to do it by teaching how to have power over instead. And that, of course, confuses people. I had this example of, if you lead a horse over some obstacles, you have a halter on the horse and you lead him over some obstacles, how you talk about that experience will make all the difference, because power over is an external solution and empowerment is an internal feeling or place to be in. And if we don't separate out also how you have power with, like, you can actually look at the horse as a collaborator or a team member, or I do this together with. It's not power over, it's power with. And therefore we both become empowered. We solve it together and we listen to each other.
What do you do in human, because human language, you mentioned earlier that the development in our brain for our language centers are very advanced in the human language, but it's very mental. It's not rooted in the body as such. What do you do to move away from the language-based interaction between you and your horses into another's more other sensory means of communications?
I think we need to accept that we are chatty species. We do talk a lot. That's okay. That's how humans communicate with each other. We use body language, of course, also, but we do speak a lot. But I think if we explore our own senses, like, I sniff my horses a lot. I love to sniff them, and I invite them to sniff me. And because smelling is very important for horses. That's how they kind of get to know you, by smell you. So if I let them use more of their senses when they are together with me, and I use more of my senses, we have an easier way to find a common ground of understanding each other. And it doesn't circulate just around my verbal language and how I use it.
I could speak to you all day, but we have to finish off now because I find this conversation so interesting, and especially around language. But we'll have to leave it for another time, because one thing I do find with horses or any other animal is that as human beings, we can say one thing but mean a completely other thing. And with horses or animals, that doesn't go. They see through that immediately, and they don't do that. So that's one trait where I see a very big difference from humans into other animals. Can you comment on that just shortly? And
we humans have everything we don't like, we try to push away. So if we don't like to feel fearful, we pretend we are not, and then we are incongruent, and we go out to the horses, and they pick that up. They know that you are fearful, even though you pretend you are not. But I actually think horses, for example, they can be incongruent too, though they are not at all on the same level that we are. But we also treat them very incongruently. And sometimes they show two different behaviors at the same time, just to try to adapt to us and our shifting way of being. So I don't know much about it, and there is certainly no research on it, but I think there is possibility that they also can be incongruent, even though we don't really pick up on that much.
That's interesting. I'll very interesting, actually. Because maybe they do pick up something from us, or had learned something from us, or maybe it sits there already. Who knows? I
think most of horses, if they have the choice, they walk away from incongruent beings. Like, okay, that is, yeah. But if they can't, if they are in a halter or you are sitting on them, they need to react or respond some way to it, and maybe they will give a little bit of that and a little bit of this, just to try to find, where are you? And then they become incongruent too.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Katarina, for doing this podcast with me. It's been absolutely incredible and very, very interesting. And I think there's so much more exploration to be done in this field. And I think what you're doing at your place, both, just this, it's not both this way of altering the language and having another way of being with horses, the equine assisted therapy, and the research-based work that you do is so important, all of these three things. Can you tell us more about where we can find more about your work, all of these, both the equine assisted therapy and also the research that you're doing, if people are interested?
Yeah, we have a website, mimercenter.org. With the English spelling on center, and we have
so that's
mimercenter.org,
and that is for your research-based work on.
Well, that's everything. Okay. We have everything there. We have a Facebook page with the same name, and we have a little group called Equine Welfare and Equine-Human Interaction on Facebook as well, that one can be part of.
Okay, I'll post links as well connected to this podcast, so people will be able to find your work and maybe explore more from there.
Thank you.
And just to round this up, for people listening to this podcast and that want to maybe explore a bit more self and open up to a more individual-based conversation with specific non-human beings, what would be your recommendation, on what would be one thing that you either have benefited from or that you see other people benefit from when doing it? Is there one thing you can say, this is, this step or this thing has worked for others, or you have a good experience with it?
I would say train your observational skills. And you do that by being out with them and thinking about what you see and trying to discern that from what you think you see and what you actually see. So keep it simple.
I think that's a really good note to end on. Again, thank you for your participation. I have loved talking to you and been doing this exploration with you. I hope everybody else has enjoyed it as much as I have. And again, if you want to find any of Katarina's work, please go to mimercenter.org, mimercentre.org. I'll also post links below. Thank you, Katarina. We're going to turn off from here. And everybody, I wish you a nice day, and go lie your heart at the ground and listen.
Thank you for listening to the Earth Conversations podcast. If you'd like to explore more in-depth material on how to open up to hearing the conversation that the Earth is trying to have with us, please visit our blog at earthconversations.org, where you can also sign up to be notified through email when new podcast conversations are ready, along with new articles and events. We would like to thank you for taking the time today to open up to the heart of the Earth and her ways of communicating with us. It is our sincere wish that you will tune into this greater conversation that she so desperately seeks us to have with her at this moment in time. To find the track to the wonderful music that underscores this podcast, simply follow the link below to iTunes or Spotify. Please take good care of yourself and the Earth, and until next time, go lie your heart at the ground and listen.
É terra, é mar, é vida infinita, é amor incondicional, é abraço apertado, carinho sempre dado, o aconchego no colo e o alimento no peito. É vida infinita.